Welcome to another YouPoker Academy lesson. In this lesson we're going to talk about when is top pair good enough to get all in. Now as you know, top pair is the weakest hand that you might consider getting all in with. You probably don't want to do it with just ace high or king high. And if you've got two pair, it's a lot more reasonable to get all in with a deeper stack. But with top pair, you kind of have to be sure that you're ahead often enough so that you're not getting stacked only by better hands. So the simple answer is get all in with top pair when your opponent has something worse. But it's not always easy to tell when your opponent has a worse hand than top pair. So what you want to do is you want to consider, if my opponent's played the way that he's played, what's the chances that he has a bluff or he has second pair or something like that. This is going to depend on board texture. It's going to depend on your opponent's tendencies, and it's going to depend on how big your stack is. So let's take a hand where you've got a great top pair. You've got an ace and a king, and your opponent has two cards. You don't know what they are. And the flop's something like king, 8, 3. Okay, so the first thing to look at is the board texture. There is a flush draw out here with two spades. There's not any real two pair hands. If your opponent has king 3 or king 8 or 8 3, you're just going to get stacked here because he doesn't have those very often. And he could have a set sometimes, but we usually discount that. We just think about the two pair hands or the flush draw hands because those are much more likely to be in his hand. So on this hand, assuming you have an opponent who's not super tight, or an opponent who's not super loose, passive, who's been raising you, indicating that he might have a really good hand, you would get all in here if you think that he would get all in with a king, because his king's going to be weaker than yours, or if for some reason he would get all in with an 8 here. Those players are not very likely. It's hard to come by, but there's a lot of players who would get in with something like king queen or king jack or even king 10. The second thing you want to look at is your stack size. If you've got 400 big blinds, there's probably a better way to play this than getting all in, because you're going to run up against a set more often if he's willing to put that much money in. Finally, since there's a flush draw out, your opponent very well might like to raise and get all in with something like the ace of spades and the 7 of spades. Seeing that he has a flush draw and an overcard, he thinks they're both outs. He thinks he's got a 12 outer and he's confident getting these hands all in. So the board texture matters, but your stack size matters as well. Let's take a little bit weaker hand, something like, say we've got jack 8 and then we've just got the queen jack. Here we don't have a flush draw. We made this the jack of clubs instead of the jack of spades. But if our opponent was to get all in here, he might have, say, the jack 10, but it's more likely he's got an ace jack, a king jack, or even two pair. Like jack 8 has a reasonable hand here if he's played jack 8. So the strength of your top pair matters. If you're thinking about getting all in, definitely consider how good is my top pair. Might I be behind to a better top pair? With a hand like this, you might want to put in 3 streets of value, but if he raises you on the river, you could see a fold if all you've got is top pair by the river. Finally, we want to talk about when you have a abnormally short stack, something like a weak top pair, maybe something like that, just a 7-8, a weak top pair, but you only have 10 or 20 big blinds. If you have less than twice the pot, it's perfectly reasonable to get all in anytime you have top pair. If the pot's 100 chips and you've got 150, 200 chips, and you bet 60 chips and he raises you all in, or he bets 60 chips and you raise them all in, those are both perfectly fine plays, because he could be doing it as a bluff, he could be doing it with a draw, he might even be making a move like 5-6 or 4-5 or something like that. So even though your top pair is weak, your stack's too short to really get off it at this point. So that's just a basic rundown of when it's good to get all in with top pair. Hope you've liked these lessons. YouPoker Academy's on YouTube, and we've got tons of lessons coming up, so check us out.